time for the Daily Planet podcast show. So sit back, relax, and give us a go. Scott and Matt and maybe a guest have undertaken an epic pod quest. We're gonna ramble on about movies and books and television and directors and film festivals and this really long list of stuff that I know nothing about, but they gave it to me and they really wanted me to read through it. And that's all I can really say about it, but it's gonna be great. Okay, start the show.
Hello and welcome to the Daily Planet podcast, your weekly podcast for all things movies, TV, books, anything else we feel like talking about. My name is Scott Daly and I'm your host, and I am joined once again, because he's back in town, by Matt Freeman. Matt, welcome back.
Well, thanks, Scott. I had a nice trip to the happiest place on earth, and now I'm back to tell everyone about it and proselytize.
That's right. We're going to talk about the Disney theme parks this episode. I'm really interested in how this is going to go, just because I think we didn't have anything really movie wise to talk about today, and you were just there, and I was there last summer, so seemed like a good enough thing to talk about.
Yeah, and we talk about Disney stuff all the time, even though we don't really acknowledge it, because I'm a fan of Disney movies. I don't hesitate to admit, and now that Marvel is owned by Disney, we end up talking about Marvel a lot, and it's interesting to me because the theme park business dovetails with their movie business in a lot of really interesting ways. But we'll get into that.
Absolutely. But first, let's talk some news, because it's been a very interesting week. First, I wanted to go into some movie news. The first thing I wanted to talk about was Max Landis. I believe you know who Max Landis is. He's a rather divisive writer in Hollywood. He wrote the movie, I think was last year, American Ultra.
Yeah.
I think. Which I actually quite liked. It's not a great movie, but I enjoyed it. But he is now going to write and direct a remake of An American Werewolf in London, which is the movie his father, John Landis, directed back in '78, I think it was. I like Max Landis' work more than I like his opinions, but I don't like this idea at all.
Yeah, that just seems like the most possible, like the most direct possible setup for comparison with the movie that you're making a remake of. Like, ideally, when you're making a remake, your goal should almost be to just cause people to not remember that it's a remake. And when you're making a remake of your father's movie, it's like, first of all, somewhat Oedipal, I guess, and also just really invites direct comparison.
Yeah, and especially with a movie that classically beloved. And frankly, I don't love An American Werewolf in London. I like it a lot, and I think what it is most famous for is the werewolf transformation scene, which was done with some incredible practical effects that still hold up today.
Yeah, it's amazing.
Yeah, it really is. And I mean, there's no way like it's going to be CGI in this movie, and I just feel like it's going to be a bland werewolf film. It's just not a good idea.
Yeah, I agree.
Moving on to other things that aren't a good idea. Matt, did you know that Starship Troopers is getting a reboot?
No, I don't think I did. I don't know. I may have heard something about that, but please tell me more.
Well, we don't really know much right now. We know that this is just a rumor. I don't think there's been a director or anyone cast yet. But it's supposed to be a more serious, and I hesitate to use the word gritty, but it seems appropriate, gritty remake. So how do you, what's your opinion on the first Starship Troopers, actually?
I like it for what it is. And it's really interesting because the book, as far as I have heard, is actually kind of a gritty and self-serious kind of sociological science fiction about like this kind of militaristic and authoritarian world where it actually spends a lot of the page space in these like debates inside the classroom where the the students and teacher are debating about the merits of their society, where you have to have military service in order to be a full citizen who votes in elections, and then when they have their actual battles with the aliens, the tone is completely different. Whereas in the movie, it's Paul Verhoeven is the old movie, right? Yeah, he has his own weird thing where he's kind of telling his own subtextual story in all the movies he does, and they're very satirical actually. So Starship Troopers, the movie, the current one, is very satirical and actually pretty hilarious if you are aware that it's satire.
Which a fair amount of people came out of that movie not realizing it's supposed to be very satirical.
Yeah, and it's interesting because it actually kind of works. It works pretty well as an entertaining movie, and then it also works as a satire. So I think that's a pretty good movie, actually. If like cheesy and corny, you just have to accept that's what it is.
Yeah. So upon further examination, Sony has hired screenwriters to write this film, and ScreenCrush.com got a chance to interview Verhoeven about this idea. And he said it's a really, really bad idea because a faithful adaptation of the novel, he describes it as very Trumpy, which he said the original book was militaristic and fascistic, but that fits extremely well with this presidential election, which I guess kind of perfectly segues us into my third news item, which was just, we're sitting here recording this on Wednesday the 9th at around 10 o'clock. So it's been about 24 hours since I realized that the presidential election in the United States was not going to go the way I thought it was. I don't think I had fully given up at this point last night, but it was not looking good already. But I don't want to get us bogged down in politics because we're not a politics show. But I feel like we have a duty to at least discuss that news briefly. And to me, the most interesting thing from a on-topic conversation is how media is going to interpret this, because I think we have a very Bush era, post 9/11 type of pop culture movie, and then we have a very Obama era movie, which we kind of starting to be less embarrassed by our country a little bit, and a little more pro-America war movies came around the Obama time. What's a Trump era film going to look like? I think that's going to be interesting.
Yeah, that's a good point, because I think regardless of whatever else happens, Hollywood is going to remain really liberal and use their art to criticize what they see as the problems with the status quo. So we'll see a lot of things that are, I think, a reaction to whatever ends up happening in the world.
Yeah, which at this point, who knows? As we sit here and talk, there are mass protests all around the country. I hope none of them turn violent, but I'm sure a few of them will. But that's America.
Yeah, it's a crazy time right now.
It is.
If you're listening to this in the future, as my brother said earlier, and I felt the exact same sentiment. I've never updated my opinions about how reality was harder than I did last night.
Yeah, it really is crazy. Like, no matter who you voted for, and no matter what your political leanings, the result of that election was shocking. It fundamentally changes both how we view elections, how we view the massive amount of money and time that goes into polling and statistic gathering and reporting, all this stuff. Things have absolutely changed. And maybe that's just a product of the 21st century and how information is distributed in this new global world. I don't know.
Yeah, I think that's interesting. I think the internet, it was definitely a much bigger factor in terms of how information was being distributed, like you said, and how conversations were being had. Also, like, just Twitter, like just take Twitter. That's like a mode of communication that was used in a very unique way this election that can't possibly have been accounted for in the standard polling methods because it's so new.
Yeah, Trump did not have a ground game. Like
Mm-hmm.
he was on the ground in a few states, but I mean, if you compare the number of ground offices in the Clinton campaign to the Trump campaign, it wasn't even close. So, I mean, his campaign was solely focused on reaching out over the internet and tapping into something. I'm not going to delve into what I think it is, but it's a very interesting time, and there are a lot of people out there that are very scared right now. I'm not going to tell them they shouldn't be scared because I don't know what's going to happen. I just think it's an interesting time.
Yeah, right. I'm tempted to be optimistic and just say, I think everything's going to be fine. But I've actually just proven that I'm not a reliable predictor because I didn't predict that he was going to win. So
yeah, I mean, I am of the opinion that our system is better designed than we give it credit for at times. It is designed to not let one. It is not about one person. It is not even about one party. Our system is built to withstand things like this, and I'm not saying legislation that is hurtful to a certain portion of our populace will not be passed. I'm not saying that things will not be passed in these next 4 years that I agree with personally, but I don't think this is we're gonna burn the entire thing to the ground type of thing. I think our system's a little better constructed than that.
I agree.
All right, so that's all the politics we're gonna say.
Yeah.
I hope we didn't piss anyone off. I tried to be as political in my politics talking as possible.
Yeah.
But let's move on to happy things, like the happiest place on earth, Disney World Land. You went to Land, right?
Yeah. I went to Land, and I have been to World too, and I wouldn't mind talking a little bit about that because it's pretty different, but it was a really long time ago.
Yeah, I've been to both as well. So
the first thing I wanted to say was something that was really interesting to me because I was there with my brother actually, with my family and several other members of my family actually, but we got into a little discussion with him and his girlfriend Laura about where Disney made its money, and we all ended up being wrong to different degrees, but the point being that Disney makes nearly a third of its revenue from its parks, and it has 11 parks actually.
Mm-hmm.
And I've actually been to Euro Disney now that I recall.
Wow.
But that's the only other, unless some other parks that I don't know of are secretly Disney parks. It's kind of amazing to me that they make a third of their $45 billion revenue from the parks and 20% of their profit from the parks.
Yeah, that's crazy.
Yeah.
And I guess I mean, like, did you happen to see how much of what percentage is the film industry, the film wing of Disney?
No.
I would not be surprised if it's not very much, because I know they do a lot of money off merchandising, and obviously they do a lot of money off the park. So I would think that the film and entertainment wing of Disney is more of a thing to funnel those two things, to funnel their merchandising sales and to funnel their park visits.
Yeah, it's definitely a very interesting, very inspiring almost business model because the things sort of funnel into each other. Like there wouldn't really be the impetus to go to the parks if there wasn't the movies. I think like a lot of the attractions are very. They wouldn't be anything if it wasn't for the movies. Like there's just the Tarzan's treehouse, and it's like it's just a bunch of stairs you climb, and you cross a rope bridge, and then you see some things, and you go down. And if there wasn't the Tarzan movie, where you and your kids are like, oh look, it's Tarzan, oh it's Sabor, he's gonna get you, like that makes it super fun actually.
Yeah.
So like the existence of the movie helps the park be more fun. I did look up the 2015 numbers while we were talking. It looks like what's being called media networks accounts for something like 23% of the revenue. No, this can't be right. These
But
numbers
that, I mean,
can't be right.
Disney owns ESPN and NBC, and so
Yeah,
like if you look, their media empire is massive. So,
yeah,
I mean, that could be. It's probably a hard number to get down to. But I think the point is that you're absolutely right that when Disney invests in things like buying Star Wars, not only are they thinking we're going to release movies, they're probably mostly thinking merchandising, and then partially we're going to integrate this into our theme parks.
yeah, right. And that's a nice segue to talk about my favorite ride, which is Star Tours. And I'm gonna start out by saying that Star Tours is a better Star Wars movie than The Force Awakens.
Oh, hot take, hot take.
Yeah, and by that I mean Star Tours. Like, I've never thought about the rides the way I thought about them on this trip, and I guess that's partly just because I was growing up, and also I just kind of was able to relax a bit more on this trip because I had relatives helping a lot,
Mm-hmm.
my parents and so forth helping a lot to take care of the kids, so I could kind of sit back and pay attention to things. And like the rides are designed so well, like they're almost designed the way a movie is designed. So you take Star Tours for example. You walk in, and the line for the ride is actually part of the ride because as you're walking through the line, you basically enter like a hangar bay, and a perfectly correct looking C3PO and a perfectly correct looking R2D2 are bantering and arguing, and what they're arguing about is like the repair of the ship that's there. And you walk past them, and you're basically just getting deeper and deeper into the complex, and you're seeing more of the like Star Wars motif things, like the lights that are kind of creeping up the wall, just like in Bespin Cloud City.
Mm-hmm.
And there's just all these things that you recognize. There's like old dilapidated droids lying around not working, and your brain actually at a subconscious level starts on. I don't want to say you think you're actually in Star Wars because that would be preposterous, but like your brain is not actually that smart on like its basic reptile level. So on that level, you do sort of think you're in Star Wars at that point.
Yeah, well, I think that's how virtual reality works, right? Like if you pummel your brain with enough visual information, it'll just start accepting the world it lives in.
Yeah.
And I think I agree. Like the Star Tours ride was great. I want to talk to you when we get to it on the actual ride part because there's parts of that I didn't like, but
Sure.
I do like that Disney has realized that their lines are ridiculous, and they've tried their best to make the lines a semi-interesting experience.
Yeah.
Obviously, you're still waiting in a line, but it adds to the experience a little bit.
Yeah, and I mean this one, because I went on the ride like 3 times on this trip, I actually noticed different things each time. And like one of the things I would notice was that at a certain point there's like some TV screens that show basically what's just a short movie, and it shows you what appears to be C3PO, who you saw earlier in the previous room, has now gone inside that ship that he was working on, and then the ship takes off and moves to a different part of the bay, and then you realize that that's supposed to be the ship that you're about to get in.
Mm-hmm.
And 3PO basically like asks the captain robot to leave the ship, and then he gets in the ship, and then when it's your turn to board the ship, then you see C3PO in the ship. So like there's actually a connecting narrative thread before you've even gotten in your seat for the ride that tells you the story of like, okay, the ship was broken down, 3PO was trying to fix it, 3PO got in the ship accidentally, and now you're getting in the ship, and he's expected to be the captain, and he's really panicking about this. And it's all like pitch perfect Star Wars tone where it's comedic, C3PO is being ridiculous, and R2 is needling him. And then once you get in your seats with the 3D glasses and everything, the ride starts. And so what were you going to say about the actual ride itself?
Well, so to me, and I went back in June, so it's very possible that they've updated and changed the ride since then, although I kind of doubt it. But to me, it felt very much like the Force Awakens portion of the ride was very much tacked on to old video. I think there was a scene when you go to Naboo and you see Naboo starfighter, so like you can tell when the different Star Wars movies came out and for what is tacked on to this experience. And while I agree with you, I like the storyline up to that point. Frankly, I don't even remember what the Force Awakens portion of the ride was at this point. But it just felt like you could see the seams and see where they recorded new things and new lines when new movies came in, and it was very transparent and obvious. And maybe that's just because I'm a miserable adult, and if I was a kid, I could have viewed it and enjoyed it for what it was. But
that's really interesting. So, having gone on it 3 times, and maybe you're aware of this already, but having gone on it like 3 times in quick succession, I noticed, of course, that they actually change up the movie content of the ride with pretty much with each new ride. So it's not just the same ride for everyone who gets on. So like,
I actually didn't know that.
Yeah, so like one of the times, I'm gonna get this wrong because it's all mashed together in my head. But like the first time, you're fleeing Darth Vader, and like Darth Vader comes down into the hangar, and your ship runs away, and then you go to hyperspace and you crash into Hoth during what looks like the Battle of Hoth, and there's AT-ATs everywhere, and your ship is like slaloming down the mountainsides of the snow planet, and then you hyperspace from there. And then you're told like, oh, you have the rebel spy on board, and then you hyperspace to Coruscant, where there's this giant space battle that looks just like the beginning of I was gonna say Return of the King,
Episode
Revenge
3.
of the Sith. Yeah, and then you like crash into Coruscant or something. I don't remember exactly. And then one of them you go to Kashyyyk, the Wookiee planet, and then you go somewhere else. And then one of them you're being chased by Jango Fett, and he's like shooting the sonic bombs at you in the asteroid field. So there's you're exactly right, Scott, that they're actually just ripping off set pieces from the movies in a way that makes absolutely no sense, because none of these things, like you'll see an X-wing, and then you'll see a fighter that is clearly from the prequels, and you'll see a fighter that is clearly actually, I don't remember seeing anything from The Force Awakens other than BB-8. BB-8 was in it.
Yeah, I'm remembering that now. That felt super tacked on to me. I mean, it's like, what's the cheapest way we can get something from the new movie in here? And I just threw BB-8 into the film. Yeah.
So they're absolutely just cramming in all the Star Wars they can cram in.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't know. I guess that didn't bother me so much.
I mean, it's probably just me just being a cynical asshole, but and like this narrative is not a complete narrative.
Yes,
this does not make sense.
This is not canonical.
But I do agree that the ride was fun, though. We waited in a very long line for that one. And did you get to? I mean, you were with kids, so I know they've converted Space Mountain to be a Star Wars ride now. I think
I did go on that. Yeah.
Is it just like they just called it a Star Wars ride, and it's really just an indoor roller coaster, and nothing much has changed?
Yeah, they didn't do a very good job on that one. Maybe I was distracted by the fact that I was afraid that my 4-year-old was going to be sucked out of her seat the entire time. But it's just like pitch dark in the ride, which it always has been. Yeah. And then you'll like pass by a projection screen that has a TIE fighter kind of flying at you, unconvincingly. And the ride, or the line rather, going up into the ride doesn't have any Star Wars aesthetic whatsoever. It's just very generic Flash Gordon type space garbage. So yeah, I didn't feel like they converted that one very well. And I almost feel like, I don't know, this is just a complete guess, honestly, but they're building the Star Wars land at Disneyland, which we hadn't mentioned yet, actually. But yeah, they're building a whole like section of the park that's going to be Star Wars land. It's going to have like a giant Millennium Falcon thing that you can go into.
Is that going to be at Disneyland? I would assume that'd be both Disneyland and Disney World.
I don't know if it's going to be Disney World, but it's definitely Disneyland, because when you go to the top of the ride where you're basically riding like a train, but it's a roller coaster. I forget what it's called, but you get to the top of that and you're actually high enough that you can see over like a fence and you can see the construction site.
Mm-hmm.
Which, you know, normally everything in the Disney park is super well aligned so that you can never see like, you know, the fact that behind the Haunted Mansion is a giant industrial looking building where the actual ride stuff is.
Yeah.
And so forth. But yeah, so they're definitely building it at Disneyland. I don't know about Disney World.
I mean, yeah, and I mean, you're probably right. This is just a temporary stopgap to hold off until that kind of stuff happens. But I mean, the other big news I think that came out of, I think it was the Disney Celebration thing earlier this year, is that they're retrofitting the Tower of Terror ride to be a Guardians of the Galaxy thing, and I think that's the first Marvel ride in a Disney park. I certainly didn't see anything in Disneyland when I was there, but I mean, it's a huge place. I could have missed it. But did you see any Marvel themed rides?
I can't think of any Marvel themed rides. No, and I had heard that they were doing something to the Tower of Terror, and the people who I was eavesdropping on seemed unhappy about that. But
yeah, I mean, the Tower of Terror is a pretty classic ride. I mean, the first time I went to Disney World, I think I was in 5th grade, and we rode that, and it was awesome. And it's very Twilight Zone-y. It's very like the story's fun and creepy and great. So I mean, I kind of get like I think it might suffer from the same problem that you had on the Space Mountain ride, which is it's just clearly a retrofit. I mean, the pictures they showed made it look really nice, but I don't know.
Yeah, I kind of agree that the Tower of Terror ride was pretty cool and special, actually. I remember distinctly being amazed, and I guess I could make a general comment about how amazing some of the visual effects are on these rides, because, you know, you're not watching a movie screen where, you know, people can do whatever they want in a computer. You're watching like a room with your naked eyes, and then something absolutely like unbelievable will happen. Like I remember from the Tower of Terror, and this is probably when I was, I don't know, 11 or something, but I still have like a very clear visual memory of it, that you're looking into was basically just like a hotel hallway or something.
Mm-hmm.
And it like dims, and then it just turns into just like you're looking into like a black star field.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
the you already said what it is, the Twilight Zone.
Yeah.
And it's completely convincing. Like it's completely convincing that the hallway has disappeared and you're looking into a black star field. And I was just amazed at that at the time. And you know, you immediately start thinking about it like a magic trick. Like, how did they do that?
Yeah.
And it's just so much like creativity and ingenuity, and that's why I wanted to talk about this. That's why I felt like it was appropriate to talk about these rides on our movie podcast, because I'm like, so much of the craft that goes into these rides is the same craft that goes into making movies. You're just making them repeatable rather than something that has to be filmed once.
Yeah, and I completely agree with you there. And I think it's very easy to kind of be snarky and dismiss the Disney parks as just things for kids. And while I will completely agree that little kids love them, it's the first time I've been as an adult with my niece, who's 6 years old, and she had so much fun. Like, she met Elsa and Anna from Frozen, and I literally have never seen a child more happy than them. I mean, she was going insane.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, there's something there. I mean, Disney is very, very committed to this experience, and that shows in the amount of time and effort they spend in constructing these rides, and constructing the narratives and the effects within the rides.
Yeah, right. And another thing, you know, the effort they put into the park, like you said, you know, you're spending a relatively large amount of money, especially if you're flying in to go to Disneyland, but they really kind of do try to make it special. Like I'm a quite, you know, cynical person, generally speaking, but like when my son dropped his hot chocolate, my 2-year-old, and started crying, and then a Disney employee appeared out of nowhere with a fresh hot chocolate for him, I was like, Disneyland this is a magical place. You've completely won me over, you know.
And I mean, it sounds cheesy, but I mean, it is like it's a place like there are thousands upon thousands of people, but it's so clean. There's really not trash everywhere. They've done a very good job. I think there's like a trash can every 5 feet or something ridiculous. Because they've realized that people will only litter if there's not a trash can in sight. So
Yeah.
they've made sure to do that. I mean, like you said, they've constructed everything so where you only see what they want you to see. You never see the artifice behind anything. And the people that work there, you know, are trained to play the part. I don't know if we did the Ariel's Grotto like brunch or something where like you just the whole like you go sit at a table and like 6 different Disney princesses come by your table and you get pictures with them and all that, which my niece absolutely loved. But like there's these people that are just like actors basically, and they have to play this part, and they do it. I mean, there's screaming kids, there's jerk kids, there's kids that are obsessed with them, and they do it, and they do it really well.
Yeah, no, we did that too actually, and then there's also just like the random Mary Poppins show in the middle of like one of the outdoor areas at one point where it's just like a spot on Mary Poppins, and at one point I saw Alice from Alice in Wonderland just like walking randomly across the park going somewhere, and like even her like gait and the way she was holding herself and holding her hands was just perfectly Alice, even though she was obviously not in the middle of an act or anything, and she made eye contact with me and then like greeted me in a perfectly Alice way and then just kept going, and I was like, that was awesome. I just met Alice.
Yeah,
I'm a 31-year-old man and I just met Alice in Wonderland, and I'm smiling about it.
Yeah, and like I mentioned the Anna and Elsa thing, like so we waited in this little line and then we got put in a room with them, and I mean it was literally like they spent 5 minutes with my niece, like just talking to her and hanging out with her and getting pictures. And I mean like in a place where they're like, you know, quantity is everything because they're trying to get as many people in. The fact that the park took the time to set this up and allow this thing to get each individual kid that goes in gets minutes with these characters, and it's awesome. And like we have a video of my niece, and it's so fun to watch because she's just so happy, and the fact that like she gets to have actual conversations with these characters, it just helps create the magic.
Yeah, no, that's I witnessed the same thing where there's no real rushing the kid along. They let the kid pretty much indulge themselves, and I think that's great.
Yeah.
There's one other ride thing at Disney World. So when was the last time you went to Disney World?
I think it was about 5 or 6 years ago.
Do you remember if there was a ride? It's not even really a ride. It's more like just an experience where it's like you there's going to be some kind of like teleportation demonstration, and it's all sci-fi, and you go sit in chairs that are surrounding like a tube, and then something horrifying happens to you.
Yeah, I remember that when it was an alien thing.
Yeah.
And then it's become a Lilo and Stitch thing.
Oh.
At least
that's interesting.
Yeah, it did last time I was there. Yeah, they like Stitch is the alien. It used to be like really freaking scary because like it would get pitch black, and they would show the alien running across the room by like making the seat thing you were in like go up and down as if it was running across your seat harness, whatever. And there would be they do breath and all that 4D experience type stuff.
Yeah. I basically that was like an incredibly impactful experience for me when I went. I don't remember how old I was, but yeah, it was definitely the old scary version when I went.
Yeah.
And it's so funny because like the first part of the ride, it's sort of a Star Trek-ish like tone where everything is very sterile, and the scientists are like, yes, we're going to demonstrate this new teleportation technology and it's going to be fantastic. and then it's like very suddenly, relatively speaking, they're like, something's wrong with the signal, and then like this horrifying alien appears in the tube, and again, it's all done with this excellent, like almost magician level sleight of hand, where
Yeah.
like a fully realized animatronic thing appears in the tube as if by magic, like you really believe it just came out of nowhere, and then it like really seemingly breaks out of the tube and really seemingly runs across the room, and then like you said, it's like as far as your hominid senses are aware, it's like creeping around the room and is right behind you. um and it's totally awesome. I don't have any point to this. I just wanted to share how awesome that was.
No, and I think you're right, and I'm kind of, I did it both when it was back that scary thing, and I've done it since they've made it a Lilo and Stitch themed ride. And I mean, it's basically the same ride, like not experience wise, but like practical effect wise. Like they use the same tools. It's intentionally taking on a much more silly tone. And that's kind of a bummer, because I really liked the alien thing, and it was legitimately scary, but I can also understand how they would want to maybe do something that's more fun of an experience than it is incredibly frightening.
Yeah, that's one thing I noticed. Like that definitely scared my younger brother a lot when we went, and because he was pretty young, and there were rides this time where like my son really didn't like the Haunted Mansion, even though it was all done up like Nightmare Before Christmas.
Oh,
and he
really?
actually really loves. Yeah, so between like Halloween and Christmas, or between Halloween and the end of the year, they do it up like Nightmare.
Oh, that's really cool.
And yeah, it's funny because as you're going through, if you're being detached about it, you can notice where they've just sort of put a veneer on things, and they don't even try to replace some things, but it goes together well enough that you're not put off by it. So yeah, like outside the building is all covered in the very particular style of the Nightmare Before Christmas, like pumpkins and scarecrow and stuff, and then once you're inside, you've got all the characters from the movie doing things, animatronic, full size animatronics doing things, and the voiceover story changes to be like a rhyme, which is very much based on the story of Nightmare Before Christmas. So
That's pretty cool.
that was fun, but that still scared my son quite a bit. So it's actually hard, I think, to make a ride, because it's a very intense experience. The rides are very intense experiences, and I think it's hard to even make a ride that doesn't scare a little kid.
Yeah, well, and I
They're
think
just like, what is happening?
there's a level of maturity you have as you get older that you can separate that this is, even if it feels real, it is most definitely not, and kids cannot do that. So
yeah.
So yeah, I mean,
and also they're just like, I don't know what's happening. They're
right, yeah.
Why are we doing this?
Yeah, that's fair. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I mean, Hana mentions kind of a good segue of one of the things I want to talk about is, the fact that we now have 2 at least of these rides that have been turned into movies. One of them has been turned into one of the biggest franchises in the world. That's, I think they're making the 5th Pirates of the Caribbean movie now, or maybe it's the 6th even. I don't even know. All that to say is the Pirates films are $8 billion franchise. Only one of which is good, which is the first one. The rest of them after that were terrible. But it is rather shocking that they took what is an old ride where you basically are just on a set path, seeing looping animatronics on this little mini story, and they turn that into what is actually a good blockbuster movie is kind of remarkable.
Yeah, no, it is crazy, because I think when the first movie came out, it was just absurd, the idea that they would try to turn their stupid theme park ride into a movie. You were almost like, this is just pandering, this is going to be awful, and then it turned out to be such a fun movie. And I agree that the sequels were no good, but the first one is like, it really holds up actually as a fun swashbuckling pirate movie. And And then of course they went in and they made fairly superficial changes to the ride just to make it line up with the film a bit better.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
yeah, it's crazy that worked for them. That Disney makes some pretty good decisions.
They do. I think that's been a secret to their success, and to me, it's kind of remarkable how those old. You get into the main part of Disneyland and the Magic Kingdom, Disney World, and it's the original rides that you get the Peter Pan, that Pirates one, the Small World, and it's amazing how well, what is it, 50 years, 60 years later, how well those rides have held up.
I think it's 60.
As I mean, they're not overly complicated. They're certainly not as impressive as some of the other rides we've been talking about. But as far as little kids, they are experiences that are short and fun. The Peter Pan one in particular, my niece got terrified by, but ended up liking in the end.
Yeah, I think we went on one of the original ones, or at least it's the only one that I think was original, where it was just you go in the is it called Moby Dick? It's whatever it is. It's the Pinocchio whale. Yeah. And then you go in the mouth of the whale, but then the ride doesn't really have anything to do with Pinocchio. It's really just you're going on this boat and you're going past all these miniatures, and the miniatures are basically just like castles and settings from the different movies. And you're outdoors and nothing is animatronic and there's not really much music, and it's very, very low key and understated.
Huh.
But it's still pretty charming actually. These are just floating down this little river and seeing little miniatures of castles, and it's if that was all there was at Disneyland, it would obviously not be impressive, but it still retains some charm all decades later.
Right. So which do you like more? Do you obviously Disneyland is your most recent experience, but did you enjoy Disneyland more than Disney World, or is it impossible to compare because of two entirely different parts of your life?
I don't think I can answer that directly, but I will say that I think Disney World has a water park associated with it.
Yes.
And that was an enormous blast when I was a kid. And I don't think Disneyland has a water park associated with it. And
I don't think so.
I'm generally somebody who likes swimming and water things. So that was a huge perk, was the whole water park aspect of it. But just frankly, I can't directly compare them. I don't know. What do you think?
Well, I think I like Disney World better, and I think it's just because it's bigger. There's more things. Disney World has the Animal Kingdom Park, which has like some of the more adult like rides. There's a massive roller coaster that I think they have a similar version of. Like there's a mountain in the middle of Animal Kingdom that's a roller coaster, and I think there's a mountain in the middle of Disneyland that's a roller coaster as well. That one has water in it. That's basically you go up the mountain and go down it in the roller coaster. But I think I like Disney World better. I like Epcot a lot. I think that's a very fun experience to eat all the different food and drinks in Epcot. So I was not expecting to like Disneyland as much as I did, because I always, in my back of the head, said, well, what's the purpose of that existing if there's the bigger and better one in Florida? But I still think it's a very good park, and it's very impressive, and I give Disney a lot of credit. They've, I think it would be very easy to just do the bare minimum to keep people coming back, and it seems like they aren't interested in that, and they go above and beyond, as we've talked about.
Yeah, they're really investing in it as an investment, as something they want to continue serving them, and it works well. We didn't even talk at all about kind of the fact that, and I guess it didn't apply to me so much because I was usually with kids, but like there's the whole downtown Disney strip where alcohol is served, and there's bars, and there's live music, and there's shopping, and it's like it's very adult oriented actually. which you don't think of when you think of Disneyland necessarily, but they definitely make a lot of money from adults in that area.
Yeah,
In fact, yeah, go ahead.
I had a client that I worked for right when I started work right out of college, and my contact at this client, she went to Disney World every year. I mean, that was just what she did. And when she had younger kids, she used to take her kids, and then as her kids grew up and weren't children anymore, sometimes they came with her, but it didn't stop her. She would go by herself if she wanted to. And I think it's very easy to kind of dismiss that as ridiculous, and maybe it is a little over the top to go every year. But I think that just because this is a theme park and just because it is mostly geared towards children, just like the children's movies we talk about all the time, does not mean that there's nothing to get out of it for adults.
Yeah, totally.
What were you going to say? Sorry.
Oh, just that the first time I went to Disneyland was because there was a conference in Anaheim, like really, really close to the park. And then associated with the conference, they gave us like free park hopper passes or whatever it is. And so clearly it was like part of the appeal of this conference for engineers was that you got to go to Disneyland. So
yeah, we had this when I was an intern at the company I worked at right out of school. They had an end of internship Disney World trip, and my group was actually the last one they did that because it was 2007 and then 2008. A lot of bad stuff happened, and they decided that it wasn't worth spending the money on that. But yeah, I mean, basically, I think it was a whole week long, and you just like they flew all the interns around the country out there, and you did various things in the park. Like some of it was like building bicycles for charity, but some of it like you got to do cooking and see how they you got to see behind Epcot and see kind of the inner workings of the park. And then of course one of the nights I think they just rented one of the 4 or 5 parks for just us for like 4 hours, so there was like no lines and it was amazing. Yeah, I mean it's fun. I'm glad I got to go. I'm glad you got to go because it gave us an excuse to talk about this. Because I mean, I think we talk about Disney a lot and we talk about movies, but you know they do these other things, and they're just important to their business as the films are. You know, to me at least.
Yeah, and also to me it got me thinking about like this is all really about narrative and storytelling and giving people an experience, and I like to think about like I don't know, I like to think of myself as a writer, but I like to study everything to get lessons that I can use as a writer. So I'll study movies not because I see myself making movies, but because I want to understand the techniques that the movie makers use to elicit certain reactions and to tell stories in certain ways. And a theme park ride is completely just as valid a medium for telling stories, and if anything, a more powerful method for eliciting reactions and establishing immersion because they can do it in such a quick time frame.
Right, it's the old
have a pretty strong effect.
Yeah, it's the old adage that like the more restrictions you force on yourself, maybe the better your final product ends up because you have to get creative in order to find ways to pull things off. So yeah, I think that definitely applies to theme parks, and there are a lot of cool little stories and narratives sprinkled around that park. I don't think every ride functions that way, but there are definitely a lot that do. I think Star Tours is a really good example of that, and and you know the Tower of Terror was as well, and I hope in its transition they craft a narrative through Guardians of the Galaxy, which I actually is a Marvel movie I very much like. I hope they make it as interesting of a narrative.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to that. I kind of want to go on that next time I end up going to Disneyland.
Yeah, I have no idea when it's coming out or anything. I heard it was supposed to be like only a limited thing, but it seems like they're spending a lot of money on it, so I don't know. I'm kind of surprised there's not more Marvel stuff there yet. I mean, there are merchandising wise, of course there is, but like rides or events, I haven't seen very much of. Maybe they're gonna make a Marvel Cinematic Universe park, just like the Star Wars park.
Yeah, maybe. Yeah, I wonder. I do wonder. I do wonder, like, do they have space that they're not using around the park, or do they always have to cannibalize other things if they want to put something else there? I really don't know.
I know in Disney World they do, because
Hmm.
that's in the middle of a swamp, and Walt Disney wisely, I don't know if you ever heard the story of how he bought up all that land.
No.
Well, he used false names and had different companies buy different parcels of the land because he knew as soon as people realized that Walt Disney was buying up a lot of land, he was planning something and they would shoot the value of the land way up. So he kind of businessed through that to get the land for cheaper than he might have been able to otherwise. But they bought a bunch of almost useless swampland and basically terraformed it almost, to be usable. So I think they have more free space at Disney World. I think the Disneyland problem was always that, yeah, it's kind of completely surrounded. I'm actually very surprised they found a place for the Star Wars part. I don't know if they knocked old stuff down or if they bought something from someone else, or I don't know.
Yeah, I actually went hunting on Google Maps to see if I could answer that exact question, and I couldn't figure it out because I think the image from Google Maps is too old.
Yeah.
But no, that's really interesting about terraforming Disney World. I vaguely remember some story about like how part of the park was like some kind of future land area of that park is basically sort of meant to be taken seriously as like almost like a World's Fair type thing, where it's like, look at the amazing technologies of the future that may be able to give us a better standard of living. And
yeah, if you read Walt Disney's like original plan for Disney World, it was crazy ambitious. Like he envisioned people living there, like actually just living there, and I think you're right. I think Tomorrowland, as it was called, was meant to be that originally, and then the Magic Kingdom was kind of their version of Disneyland, and then I think Epcot was where he envisioned people living like an actual world village where people from all over the world came and lived together in some sort of utopia. But obviously it didn't work out that way, but it is still cool to see. But
yeah, props for being insanely ambitious.
Yeah. All right, so that's, unless you had something else that you wanted to talk about before we wrap this thing up, that's the Disneyland, Disney World experience.
No, I'm satisfied. We didn't talk about Euro Disney, but there's really not much to talk about.
Where are all the other ones now? Is there one in Japan still?
Let me look that up real quick.
Sorry to put you on the spot.
No, it's okay. The Euro Disney was definitely in France, somewhat near Paris. And parks and destinations. Let's see. There's one in Hawaii.
Oh wow, I didn't know that.
There's one in Shanghai. But it's a resort though. So when it says resort, I assume that's something less than a full park.
Yeah, I bet you're right.
Yeah, so Shanghai, Hong Kong, Tokyo, Paris, Hawaii. These are all places where they use the word resort. I don't really know.
Yeah, I think that gets us there. I thought I read that a lot of those international ones didn't do very well at first, but I think recently they might have retooled them and they're working a lot better.
Yeah, that may be the case. I remember finding Euro Disney plenty fun, but like no one was there. It was exactly the hilarious, joke from the Itchy and Scratchy Land Simpsons episode where there's just no one at Euro Itchy and Scratchy Land. That was exactly our experience. It was unbelievably vacant considering how crazy. Like massive and expensive it was. So
that's crazy.
Yeah.
All right. So that's it. If you've never been to Disneyland or Disney World, I think we both agree that we would strongly encourage people to take the time. Whether or not you have kids, I think little kids will love it, but I think you'll find something there as well.
Yeah, and Scott, are we going to be getting that check from Disney
I just
the
got
mail?
Disney. If you could, Scott Daly, 85. Just,
It-
just.
Just kidding. We wish.
Anyway, before we wrap this thing up this week, Matt, why don't you let me know? We haven't gotten to talk to you about any recommendations or what you've been absorbing in entertainment lately. So, why don't you let me know?
I
In
will.
the world, let the world know.
I will. You mean right now?
Yeah, right now.
Well, I never found the name of that thing though.
Oh no.
There was this Australian documentary on Netflix about parasites, which was really really awesome.
Well, there you go. Just Google Netflix Australian documentary Parasites. You'll probably find it.
Just Google parasites and start flipping through images. You'll be fine. Yeah. Why don't you tell us your recommendation and I'll see if I can Google the name of this thing while you're.
Oh right.
Yeah. While you're doing that.
So I got to see Nicholas Winding Refn's new film, newish film. It came out this summer, but I missed it. The Neon Demon, which is a horror tale about the LA fashion industry. If you don't know, Refn is responsible for the Ryan Gosling film Drive and also Only God Forgives, which was a movie that came out 3-4 years ago. I really enjoy Refn's work. I really like Drive, and I loved Only God Forgives. He's very artistic, and his films are artsy and kind of abstract. This film in particular kind of explores the life of LA models and how these women literally and figuratively eat each other alive. It is filled with beautiful imagery, really, really wonderful performances, and it's just a really good movie. I'm trying to decide if it's my favorite of his films or not, but it's close. But that's the Neon Demon. I think it's available for free now on Amazon Prime.
Awesome.
I bought the Blu-ray because I do that, but it is free streaming if you want to check it out. Very, very well done film.
Yeah, I mean, I'm a huge fan of Refn. I've somehow still managed to not have seen Only God Forgives, but Drive is one of my favorite movies.
I would say Drive is his most commercial film. It is the most traditional narrative type structured film. Only God Forgives is a very, very different kind of movie, and I know a lot of people that really loved Drive that were kind of totally turned off by Only God Forgives, and I even understand it. It's a very strange film. It is difficult to read. Does not have your typical narrative, but I think it's beautiful and also like really fucked up.
Yeah, well, sounds great.
Which is about what I would say about this film. But yeah, Matt, I think you would like this one. I don't know about Only God Forgives. You might like it, but yeah, that's Refn's new film. Did you have any luck?
No, I've been searching this entire time.
Are you sure this thing exists?
Can almost conclude that it doesn't exist and that I just had a very vivid dream about parasites and thought it was a Netflix documentary.
That shows you've been watching way too much Netflix when your dreams just become Netflix shows.
Yeah, right. That's how I perceive reality now.
But maybe one of those ideas is good enough that we can sell it to Netflix because the way they're tossing money around lately. Yeah,
it's true. Maybe we can sell them about a show about a guy who has dreams that become Netflix shows.
There's a scary movie coming out with that concept where they two characters adopt a little kid and his nightmares like become real. I can't remember what it was called, but I was like, oh, that's a kind of interesting concept.
Yeah, it kind of reminds me of like a Twilight Zone premise.
Yeah. Matt, have you got into Black Mirror yet? I mentioned it on the podcast last week, but you weren't here, so.
Pretty sure like I've been at Disneyland since we last spoke, essentially. So,
did you watch any of the older ones? Because it seems like a show that'd be right up your alley.
No, I want to. I mean, it seems like exactly the type of thing that I love, but no, I haven't watched it yet.
Yeah, I think you need to. And I'm not like whenever you get around to it, but I think it'd be fun to do an entire episode talking about that show because I think there's a lot to talk about.
Okay,
and it's really great.
Yeah. That's a great idea. I'll make that a priority.
Okay, cool. All right, so I think that's it for us this week. Matt, where on the internet are you located?
I'm still on Twitter. Still at Mordinamail.
Still don't know how to spell it.
Still don't know how to spell it. And still occasionally write articles for dailyplanetfilms.com, 2 of which have become topical again, or maybe 3 even. But
I noticed that because someone dropped a comment, and I was like, oh, that means people are making their cycle through it again.
Yeah, well, I think for whatever reason, my posts tend to be about moderately politically relevant things, and so now that we're in this highly political moment in time, people are reading them again, I guess.
Well, there you go. It's good.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. It's cool. It's fun.
All right. I can also be found on Twitter at ScottDaly85. Our website Twitter, where you can follow to find news about what podcasts we're doing, news about the Kryptonian Collection, Phantom Zone, our Deconstructing series, everything we do here on the podcast. On the website is at Daily Planet Films, and you can find all that stuff at dailyplanetfilms.com. If you're listening, we are on iTunes, we are on Stitcher, we're getting back on SoundCloud. If you could take some time to subscribe to us, to share, to give us star ratings and written ratings, we will read your rating here live. It will be live for us, but not for you. So if you take the time to do that, that'd be great. And if you like what we do and want to see us do more of it, you can support us on Patreon. That's patreon.com/dailyplanetfilms. Matt, I don't know what we have planned for next week. I think it's a Kryptonian Collection again, but I do know that we are doing a special bonus episode, which I'm about to record as soon as I get off the phone with you, because I saw Doctor Strange last weekend, and I wanted to talk about it. So we're going to do a quick bonus, probably half-hour episode that'll come out the day after this one comes out. That'll just be us diving into Doctor Strange a little bit, talking how we felt about that. Spoilers, I didn't love it.
All right. Well, since I didn't see it and probably won't see it in theaters, I will go ahead and listen to that when it comes out.
All right. And that's it for us. We will let you guys know what Kryptonian Collection film we're doing as soon as we figure that out, so you guys can watch and follow along at home. But Matt, it's good to have you back. And everyone else out there, we'll see you next week.
Podcast is over. It's done. We hope you all had some fun. Go back to your work or your school. Maybe the gym. Hey, that's cool. Regardless, just go away. But please come back next